Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Get the Mic. I'm your host on the left, Owl,
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
and this is a pre-recorded episode. As you can see, the chat is not on the right-hand side. We're having to do this because we want to keep putting out content for you guys, even though some scheduling issues have arisen and prevented us from releasing live streams in a consistent manner. However, today we will be covering the next episode that we were getting to before. And on this one, we're talking about Giran, the monster beast Giran, and Goku. Anything you want to add, Brock, before we continue?
No, I think that this is basically right on the edge of us getting into the thick of what this saga is really about. So we're basically going to start digging into it this time.
Right, and specifically because our hero Goku is directly involved in this match, where we haven't really seen him involved in a match of consequence yet. We've seen him in the preliminaries, but those were never going to be an issue for him. But here we see, and this is what I wanted to start with because it characterizes our entire episode, and that is Bluma saying, "What is that?" Actually, it's not Bluma, sorry. It's Oolong saying, "What is that? He's utterly a monster, isn't he?" And yes, he is utterly a monster. Giran is a dragon for all intents and purposes.
Right, he's monstrous. Right.
But he's a monster that can participate in hierarchies. He's a monster of monsters.
Right, or a monstrous mode of being.
Right. And so this is what Goku's pitted against. It's the ultimate evolution of the monster versus what we've seen so far, the development of the young protagonist, the young hero.
Yeah, it's basically a real dichotomous manifestation of it, right? So it's really laying out the lines of like, okay, as we ascend the hierarchy here, as we're working our way up to the point on the tournament rankings, right?
Well,
it becomes
this is
more and more serious. And
this is
more,
also the last monster that gives Goku any kind of challenge. If you think in the future, the next couple of tournaments, let's say, none of the monstrous creatures are anything for any of our fighters.
Sure.
This is the last one because this is the monster of monsters.
Well, this is the monster as such, right?
Exactly. Utter. And I love that they use the word utter, right? He is utterly a monster. He is a monster as such.
Right.
And before we actually get to see them fight, it starts to rain. What do you think of that? What's going on there?
Well, symbolically, I would associate the rain with the unconscious, with sort of a nourishment from the heavens. So
It's not just nourishment, but a reprieve, right? Because it allows both modes of being, which both modes of being acknowledge the significant threat of the other. And it allows them to, let's say, reflect on their position at the time. And we actually see a manifestation of that in the coming slides.
right, the situation immediately following this is sort of a microcosm of that, right?
Exactly, right. We get to see everyone's place in the hierarchy, basically.
Yeah, I think that this is good. A friend of mine was telling me about a similar situation that happens in another anime. I think it's in Yu Yu Hakusho, where whenever a certain two come up against each other for what they represent, it immediately calls down sort of a thunderstorm, a lightning strike, right?
Well, I
and
also
puts a stop to everything.
I also want to say the effect of this could be done by having a flashback as well, but it's much more effective by doing this and then progressing the story with the characters going forward. You could have a flashback of each of the characters from where they were, whatever, right, reflecting, and have them still fight in the ring. Not ideal, as we can see here. What's going to happen is better characterization, and ultimately a better mythological story because we get to see what the monster of monsters, how he can integrate into society, and what makes him beyond that of a monster, but not quite.
Well, he's almost hybrid, right? Because he's integrated, but he's still monstrous.
Exactly. And we'll get to it. Anything else we want to say about the rain real quick?
No.
Perfect. Well, let's go on. I love that Toriyama here uses the like stranger walking into a bar motif with the antagonist, because normally it's done with like, you know, the Clint Eastwood type, like the man with no name, or even Guts.
Well, the stranger is an archetype, right? And this is sort of you see this manifest in westerns a lot as the man who's unknown walking into the common society, right? Walking into the bar, unrecognized, sort of a personification of the outside or the exterior, the stranger, right? The unknown. So there's a chaotic nature. So here's a lizard man, right? A chaos entity representing that through the motif that is normally actually manifested in westerns.
Right, and in this instance, he's still mysterious, and he is still the, let's say, progenitor of chaos amongst these people. And as we see, he kind of breeds chaos wherever he goes. But I also like how it illuminates the surrounding area and the people within. That lightning, which kind of what we were saying, is nourishment from the heavens and the reprieve of combating this mode of being, is also what allows the dragon team to see Giran coming, let's say.
Yeah, and I mean, you can think about it in a more symbolic way if you would consider that when the weather is bad, people go inside, right? They turn inward, whereas whenever the weather is good, then they want to go outside. They're more extroverted or exterior, right? They're not reflective. So you can have this association with inclement weather, right? Water falling from the heavens as this introverted, reflective, non-external mode of being, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sort of like, okay, you're confronted with this mode of being. Reflect. How do we represent that reflection? This is a really good way.
And the microcosm of the bar setting. And I also wanted to include this because it is one of those clues of Giran's integration that Brok was talking about a minute ago.
Right. Well, there's always sort of a place at the table for the stranger, right? We kind of understand that culturally.
It's almost there's always a bigger fish. There's always going to be someone.
Yeah. Well, you can see this in Game of Thrones, right? Where the stranger is part of the pantheon, right? So there's sort of a reverence for the stranger motif or for the archetype of the unknown personification, right? And so it's to say that he's played a part in the hierarchies that you know about because he is a manifestation of something that's part of all hierarchies.
Exactly. He is a beast who's entered a hierarchy, which is not something Goku's encountered yet, but we'll see how his spirit measures up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, we're going to see first the power of this bestial form. And I don't know if this is a reference to Berserk. It would be cool, but I don't know. This just reminds me so much of when Guts cuts that first guy in half.
Yeah, episode 1, 1997, right?
Definitely. Or chapter 1, right? Not chapter 1.
Not exactly.
Not exactly chapter 1, but right. I mean, when he goes into the bar. But we see that the monster beast Giran is able to dismantle the elders of the Orin Temple.
Right, the elders who had intimidated Krillin, he swats them away, right?
Like flies, basically. And particularly, They challenge him and mock the idea, and I think this is significant because they both in the dub and the sub mock the idea of the tournament now that it is down to Jackie Chun, the boys, and Giran, and I guess Namu as well.
Right.
But right, they mock the idea of the hierarchy and are therefore swatted away by this mode of being.
Yeah, I think that's kind of attached to what I was saying, where it's like there's sort of a spirit manifest in all hierarchies. That is the monstrous shadow, sort of what that hierarchy would represent, right? And so he's kind of a representative of the hierarchy here. So they come in here and they question the legitimacy of the hierarchy, and it's like you're so far below the hierarchy that he can easily, sort of as a representative of it, just swat you away.
While I think the bartender there is pouring milk, right?
Right. He asks for milk.
And while he's getting milk, he beats them all up while the milk is pouring. I think there's something like that. But why milk? Why milk, Brok?
Strong bones.
Oh, the 90s memes. You know, I have to say, I don't know if the, let's say, adolescents of today know about that meme. Because, yeah, in the 90s, and this is going to age us here. This is going to tell everyone our age. But in the 90s, yeah, those milk build strong bones commercials and got milk campaigns pretty much everywhere.
No, I think that this is actually a personification of Giran here that's similar to Goku, where, before he fights, he wants to take in nourishment, right? And milk is more nourishing than, say, like a beer, which is, what it's clear that the monks are imbibing, right?
It is true the monks are imbibing the beer, which probably they shouldn't be as monks, first of all. But secondly, what do you think about the idea of processed versus non-processed? Because milk is not processed. Well, in this instance, I don't imagine it's too processed. But beer is manufactured by the hands of man. I think that it's significant that not only can Giran only eat meat, because there was nothing else on the plate at the time, and also he drinks milk. It's almost like a living, only consuming living in unprocessed things.
It's like a full disintegration, right? That anything that is an integrated part of processing in society is he can't integrate with, because it would take him out of the margin.
Well, he's still a monster, right?
Yeah, so he has to remain monstrous in character, right?
Fair. I just wanted to know if you had any insight, because it's something I've been puzzling out as well.
I think that it's because he's a representative of like monstrous as such, right? In the hierarchy, like the monstrous.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And so after he beats up these monks, Yamcha challenges him to a fight, and the milk pays off. His bones are so strong that Yamcha basically breaks his leg.
Yeah, he is more stout than Yamcha. He's got a higher constitution.
Well, it's interesting. We actually don't know. Although we could suppose from the future knowledge we gain that Yamcha would probably lose. We don't know who would win at this time, because the incomplete and immature masculine is still powerful, and I don't know if it is to say that the immature masculine will always lose to the monster of monsters.
Yeah, it feels like a coin toss, right? That's kind of the edge that you see in even like Arthurian tales. That's just like, okay, the thriving young masculine has to put it up to chaos, to fate, to fight the monstrous. So it's like, this is a threat. This is a real threat to Yamcha.
And I mean, Beowulf isn't someone who has like had children or anything. He's still an immature masculine figure, let's say. And when he fights Grendel, right, that is a monster of monsters. And he's able to prevail. So we don't actually know. We don't know who would win, but it's good. It's a good microcosm to see how they measure up, right? Giran is at least as strong as Yamcha.
Right. So we know right away, like, okay, we don't know how seriously he needs to be taken, but he needs to be taken to basically on a basic serious level.
And it's also a point where Yamcha is useful as not a jobber, but as someone who can measure up the strength of the enemy. He's used in this way a couple of other times. Some of them, I think, to definitely his mythological detriment. And
unfortunately,
I wish it didn't happen, but we'll get there in like 10 years. We'll be old fucking men by that time, decrepit.
Yep.
Just cerebral palsy, whatever that is. We'll have it.
We'll be talking about Yamcha in the crater.
In the crater. So, who stops the fight? And this is before Goku intervenes, which Goku has an excellent line. I think I do briefly want to mention that. After Yamcha kicks Giran, he says, man, Giran's built like a mountain. And then Goku slides in, doesn't even walk, slides in.
He slides in.
And says, he means pebble.
He means like a pebble.
I love Goku, dude.
It's great.
He's my favorite character.
He skids in there.
He skids in there. So, I wanted to put this, and I'm curious to ask you why you think I put this one, this particular frame.
Well, Roshi is playing the role of a judge to Yamcha as well, right? And it would be the spirit of Roshi, the spirit of the judge, to tell him that he's not acting in a good.
Well, hold on, because Yamcha's already.
He's not playing in the right way.
This
right?
is whenever Goku's about to fight.
Yeah. Well,
he's
I guess to Goku.
Yeah,
right?
he's more talking to Goku.
Well, I guess to tell Goku that he's not playing in the right way, right? Like he's not playing by the agreed upon rules.
See, I think this is Roshi acknowledging that we all subordinate ourselves to the hierarchy.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, actually.
And
the hierarchy being the rules, right?
Right. It's not so much the rules as it is the spirit of the hierarchy, right? The spirit of advancement in the proper way. And right now, Roshi's saying that the way you are advancing yourself right now is not proper. We've agreed on the proper way, and this is gonna get you shunned or get you disqualified from that mode of being.
Right, you're acting outside of the proper expression of good within the terms or the rules of this hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
And all the hierarchy is defined by inherent rules, right? Like you're saying, like this hierarchy encompasses this set of boundaries.
Yeah,
those are the rules,
strength,
right?
Or chess, or tennis, whatever. Right?
But part of it, this is sort of it's like a chapel, right? And in this episode, in the Japanese, they have to consult with the priests to know how they're going to rule on something, right? So there's a propriety aspect to it as well, right? So there's a disqualification for acting outside of what this place represents, right? So
right, exactly.
That's part of it.
And I think we are on the same page for the most part. Actually, I think we're basically on the same page entirely. Here we have a meme. This is amazing. I love this walk. I think this is the first panel you put in for this episode.
It had to be.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. We don't have anything like this in Z, man. This is so pure.
What about Super?
No. Everything is too skinny in Super.
Look at this chonk
but this boy. Look at this.
Look at this chonk boy.
That's a thick ass boy.
And look at his arm. Oh my god. So he
Look at
walks
his
in,
head.
struts in, boom. He's like, I don't care. We're good to
He
go.
walks in when they call for Goku, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah, they call for Goku. He's just like, whatever, I'm just going to come out.
Oh, whoa. Yeah. What do you think about that?
There's an interesting dichotomy between Goku and Giran here that's being played out, right? Where they're competing in their eating, right? And it's almost being played out like they're really measuring up to each other as opposites. So it's creating this inherent rivalry between the two. And I like that when Goku's called for, he comes walking out as almost like a shadow. And Goku is literally unconscious.
Go on with that. Goku's unconscious?
Right. So what we don't know, but what we're about to see, is that Goku is unconscious right now. He has fallen asleep.
I see what you mean. Right. And so
It's a loose connection, but you see what I'm saying with the chaotic, right? The unconscious.
No, I do on that. I lost my train of thought though. What I was gonna say on about Giran coming out first. Oh, and the dichotomy with, let's say the dichotomous competitiveness between the two of them. I think it's because the hero that speaks truth forward and tradition, and let's say respects tradition, is somewhat in some people would see some of the aspects of that mode of being as bestial.
Well,
for example, like I let's say someone who uses old technology doesn't really like new technology, right?
Right.
Someone might see that as a bestial nature, but if it's because of the spirit of the thing, let's say someone always calls other people instead of like using text or something like that, that may be seen as bestial by some people who are more advanced in their technological consumption. What do you think about that, Brok?
Yeah, I think that there's, I don't want to say, it's like I think in our time, we're accelerating towards a more and more rapid sense of that, right? Being able to look back at a time and consider it more bestial or more simplistic to our nature, right? And taking a step back and looking at Dragon Ball through that lens, it's sort of like remembering something that we've forgotten in this cyclical nature of, I don't know, our accelerating culture.
Definitely. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that the similarities between the two might be misconstrued.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's opposites as much as it is parallels. Right? Because they both like to eat. Namu would be the opposite, not eating.
Yeah, well, it's like a similar spirit, but with different orientation.
Or like a
right?
reflection almost.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a reflection is a good way of putting it as well, right? Where it kind of ties into a shadow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's an after image, right?
An after image. And we're going to see some of that soon.
Yeah.
But then Goku does come out? Oh, no, he falls asleep.
So I just thought it was interesting that
he's lit that. Yes, I see. Yes,
that Roshi is calling him an idiot in this situation, and B, that he immediately proclaims, "Aha! Technically, I win." Right.
Well, that's the bestial nature, no sense of honor, right?
Right. There's just the sense of success for success's sake.
It's let's say
to serve the self.
Survival of the fittest, right?
Yeah. Which, you apply survival of the fittest to a specific definition of rules.
Dude,
It will try to claim the win as soon as it possibly can.
I like Giran's expression in the top left corner.
His expressions through the entire episode are amazing.
Oh, they're so good. The animation is really good.
Yeah, I love the animation in this episode.
So,
but yeah,
what
I
is
really
that?
just put these slides in so I can kind of continue the logic of what's happening here.
Sure. And we do see that Ranfan finds him. Is that right?
Right. She finds him and calls out, and they all come running in from the right on this frame and come skidding to a halt as Roshi flies overhead. He's not flying towards Ranfan, as you might expect.
I think so they fall because of the outrageousness of Goku falling asleep.
And Roshi just comes flying across the screen.
But I think the reason this point is here is to say that the only way that the monster beast can conquer the spirit of the heroes if the hero's unconscious.
Right, the spirit of the hero, if properly engaging, right? If awake to what is happening with the monstrous, succeeds against
I
the
want to
monstrous.
start using a different word other than awake. I want to use attentive, because that includes, maybe awake.
Attentive is good.
It's one of the things I like about the English language is that there are so many words to be more precise, and precision is actually important in speech.
Well, especially for what we're trying to talk about.
But right, if the hero is paying proper attention, there's no way praying proper. If the hero is paying proper attention, there's no way for the monster beast or the monster of monsters to overcome that mode of being on the hierarchy, let's say.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of a way to say that if you don't pay attention, there is a hypothetical monster that will take advantage of the situation, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It works the other way around, sure.
Mm-hmm. And so this is Goku having to learn that lesson.
But I would say the reason that all of our characters here are flabbergasted is because of let's say, the stakes at hand, because Goku not overcoming a monster of monsters at this point is really would be a regression in his mode of being.
Right. It wouldn't make sense.
It wouldn't. And so they're shocked that it would even come to Goku's mind to take a nap, but he does. And now he's back. He's all settled up.
Audience has the same reaction.
They're pretty their socks are knocked off, let's say.
They're all knocked on their asses by how stupid Goku has been.
And that's the thing. Goku definitely has some flaws. Just because he is the spirit of the hero and the Logos does not mean he's infallible.
Well, angels float because they take themselves lightly.
Right,
this
exactly.
This is a case of Goku taking himself a little bit too lightly.
Well, I mean, if he didn't, he might be a certain light bringer that we know.
Precisely.
Well, we'll get there.
Oh, we'll get there.
And so Goku's nap is over, and it's time for the battle. Oops. So first thing that we see.
Yeah, so Giran, the first thing that he does is he attempts to trick Goku. He acts in bad
successfully.
faith. Well, he attempts and then succeeds at tricking Goku into paying attention to the wrong thing, right? So we were talking about attentiveness, and that's why I think paying attention is actually a really good way of describing this. We have a situation where he is trying to trick his ability to focus his attention and succeeds because he sucker punches Goku while he's looking at what he's telling him to look at.
When his attention is in the wrong place.
Exactly. So there's a bit of a fake out here where Goku gets smashed into the wall and then he lays there prone and they start counting down and then he just jumps up and acts like nothing happened.
Well, the crowd and Bluma, they're all upset. They think he might be done for. But Goku's already survived his attention being diverted.
Right. This is Goku acting in good faith and having to just encounter this forthrightly.
And so he continues to do that. Now, there's something I love about the English dub. Because in the English dub, when Giran is trying to trick him, he says, "Look, I got something in my hand. Come see it, right?" And then after he punches Goku, Goku turns to him and says, "I don't care what you were hiding. I don't even want to see it anymore."
Yeah, I really like that line.
I love that line because it's better than the sub line because it characterizes Goku more. It gives him that quality of trusting humility that is kind of absent from this reading of it with the sub.
Right, it reads more earnest in Goku's character that he
truly believed that Giran had something.
He took him to be
see.
honest, right?
He trusted Giran to be honest, right? To be an honest actor.
Right. He was able to see the potential in, somebody's word, which is, sort of a holy attribute.
But it ain't like nothing happened. That hurt a little bit. I guess that'll work too. He does shrug off the attack, the sucker punch from Giran.
Well, there's a funny honesty connected to Goku whenever he says stuff like this, because it's like he'll tell an enemy like, "Oh, that hurt a little bit." Like, you shook me up a little bit, but and it's kind of funny because we see it play out. This is probably the first time we see this play out in a fight like this. But the reaction on Giran's face.
Oh, yeah, it's true. It's complete shock because it's rare to see a spirit that can overcome the monster of monsters. And that's true even currently, I'd say.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. So then they begin to fight, but Goku actually easily overpowers him after fighting tons of monsters in his day, let's say, and he throws him out of the ring.
Yeah, this is nothing new for Goku.
Now, we've talked about throwing out of the ring versus submission before. Do you want to expand any on that, Brok?
I think you could probably expand on it better than me. I think it's interesting here, the dichotomy, right? Because we're going to see that he does the same thing to Goku. But I think it's the next slide. He explicitly states that he cannot be thrown out of the ring, that it doesn't work on him, right? So if we're going to talk about what it means to be thrown out of the ring, I think that we start with why it is that Giran can't be thrown out of the ring.
Giran can't be thrown out of the ring because he is a creature of hierarchy. He is the monster of monsters. He can't be removed from the hierarchy because he's the idea of the hierarchical monster.
Exactly. So what I was saying earlier, right? That he is a representative of the hierarchy itself.
Yeah.
A manifestation of a part of it. But he only exists within the hierarchy. So the hierarchy being... Well, why does a dragon have all of its attributes, right? Because it embodies all of what you can see. It's an air domain, earth domain. It's an elemental being, right? And so it's representative of the hierarchy as far as we see the hierarchy. And so, we see something like Giran as being a piece of the hierarchy.
And as a piece of the hierarchy, he cannot be removed from the hierarchy, which is what it means to be pushed out of the ring.
Yes.
Absolutely. I don't lose by falling out of the ring, says Giran as he flies back with his dragon powers.
I don't lose, right? Yeah, that's the way he says it.
And so Goku is going to have to come up with a different strategy. He's going to have to make him give up, right? So then we see this. And what do you think about this? Because his breath weapon is not fire, but something else.
It's something restrictive, right? So we were just talking about how he's a representative of the hierarchy, and we talked a bit about rules. But this is sort of the compulsion upon the hero to act in such a way that they cannot find a good mode of being or a good action to take. I think it's sort of symbolic of that. It reminds me a bit of the Dark Knight with what the Joker does. Whenever he sets people up so that they don't have they're double bound, right? They don't have a good choice. And so it's something that Goku could be vulnerable to in his earnest sort of eagerness and his young nature.
And so what you're saying is, and I think I agree with you,
It's the prisoner's dilemma, or you could say
is that the monster of monsters creates scenarios that are no-win scenarios, unlike the regular monster who can create, scenarios that are possibly win
a
scenarios.
win and a loss.
Sure.
These are double binds, right?
Right.
And we see it as a double bind on him.
And it is expressed that way. And the reason it's manifest through the breath, right, it is because that is the creative force of the creature, Giran here.
Right, it's a sort of a pneumatic thing. It's part of his spirit. It's a spiritual attack.
It's what you speak forward, right?
Yeah.
What Giran speaks forward is this double bind. And it's
we've seen
not been broken, he says, since he's done it. He's
right.
never been broken.
We've established him as a rules stickler, right? And so what he speaks forth is that on Goku, right? So he binds him to something that restricts Goku's ability to defend himself.
Yep, he binds him and then he throws him out of the ring, removes him from the hierarchy. So you got these two.
He says that if you engage in the hierarchy, you're problematic.
Get out of here.
If you try to defend yourself, you're a racist.
There's your two binds. Racist and problematic. Put those over there. Man, this is going to be our most downvoted episode.
Oh boy, bring them on.
But right, I mean
that's one of those double binds, right? It's sort of
I don't know if it's actually to it is a double bind, but I don't think it's specific to Giran. It would be more like the necessity of food or the necessity of hunger,
or
right?
like, destroying part of my body so that you don't lose this contest. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
That puts the hero in a state of like, well, I can't cross this line.
Sure. Right. And he would have to. And so he throws him out of the ring. And how is Goku saved but the way on which he travels?
Right, so
the mode by which he lives his life actually saves him from the double bind.
So he calls out to the Nimbus, and it catches him just before he hits the ground. And he's kind of flying into the city, right? So he's out of the hierarchy as such and sort of sent back into civilization, like cast back out into the world.
Well, put back into the hierarchy by the way on which he travels. I think that's significant to say.
Onto the ground, right?
And this happens sometimes in heroic stories, that the hero is temporarily removed from the hierarchy, but can then be readmitted because of their virtue. This happens in, let's say, Harry Potter at the end of it, when Dumbledore awards them all the points, right? It's by their virtue of their mode of being is that they're able to win the House Cup.
It's their way, right? Their mode of being.
Even though they were removed or they were defeated, let's say, in the hierarchy by Slytherin in the first year. I actually don't know that much about Harry Potter. I know the first couple of books, but that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Basically, they lose by the letter of the rules, but their spirit ennobles them and allows them to win anyway.
And that's exactly it. The spirit that people have can push them farther and keep them in situations that they otherwise couldn't be in. And so that's what we see here. And then is what Brok was talking about. They consult the priests, and the priests allow it to happen only once. And why do they consult the priests?
So this is pretty interesting to me. I'm not positive why I think that it's done that way. Their insistence that he can't continue to do that, I think it's representative of your confrontation with what Giran represents isn't something that you can continually just rely on your mode of being to defeat. That you need to be engaging with it and active with it, and you need to overcome it rather than just by default not be defeated by it, right? It's something for you to overcome. So it sets Goku in that state.
Well, I also think that's why, and what we're going to see in a minute, it's why the same thing isn't tried twice, because that's not the point of it, is the mode of being that people have can assist them in situations in which they're paired up in a hierarchy against others, and particularly against monstrous others. However, it only being allowed once is to say that it is something that needs to be confronted. And I agree with what you were saying, and especially if it's, let's say, it's almost not, it can be nihilistic or even bestial arguments like anarchism per se could be some of these binds that we're seeing on Goku that need to be addressed. It could be a number of those things, but really it's that bestial and monstrous nature that is binding him, and he needs to confront his monstrous and bestial nature. And we're going to see the explanation of that, and it's kind of blowing my mind right now as I'm talking about it.
Yeah, it's about that personification, right?
Well, because how does one do that? How does one confront the bestial? How does one confront the monster beast?
Well, Carl Jung would say that this is integrating your shadow, right?
Well, here's what it is, right? The tail regrows. Accepting that nature.
Right. Goku is
Precipitates
adapting to interface with the monstrous by reintegrating his bestial nature
and
at the time that he needs it.
Man, I should have asked you to get some clips of the reaction, because Bluma, Oolong, and Poir react like horribly to this. They're like,
they're horrified.
They're horrified because it is the bestial nature of Goku come back, right? Particularly here. And it's not random that it grows back. Like some people say that the tail is more like a MacGuffin thing, and it's not. It has to grow back during this bestial fight.
This is the way that he wins this fight.
Because this is the only way that he can overcome that duality of the bestial and the hierarchical.
Well, okay, so like you have like an upper and lower masculine principle that are associated ultimately with the logos. And so for Goku, without his tail, right, he's one. He's not two principles. He's one. He's missing his lower masculine principle, right? He gets hit with a double bind because he's unilateral. He doesn't experience that duality, right? Whereas this is monstrousness altogether, and he needs to be able to break out of that double bind. And how does he do it? He integrates the second half of himself.
Well,
right.
Giran is monster and hierarchy, which is what I would say those two things are binding Goku are, right? And yes, he can overcome one, like you said, without his tail, but he needs his tail to overcome the bestial.
Right. He needs to be able to operate on the two modes.
Precisely. And so he does. He freaks everyone out. Even Giran is freaked out.
Giran says, "You're not a human then?" What do you think of that?
Well, I think that's the Ubermensch.
This is the Superman, right? The Overman.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what Nietzsche was talking about. Someone who can integrate their shadow and then exceed their expectations is exactly it.
Or exceed their limitations, right?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Because
what did I say?
Expectations, I think. But
okay, limitations.
But yeah, I mean, that's what's happening here, because as far as chaos or the bestial is able to interpret Goku, it sees limitations on Goku placed on him by itself. And Goku, by his will, now that he has his tail back, now that he can interface with that bestial nature, he
is
can
all the stronger for it.
Overcome his limitations, the limitations placed on him by that duality, right? And so he becomes more integrated as the self.
slightly more integrated from season 1, and he'll continue to become more integrated as we go along. But here he does say it feels better having a tail after all. In the dub, I think it says that he always feels so much stronger when he has his tail. I think those are both significant reads, particularly because when integrated with his shadow, Goku feels stronger and more confident and more driven and more, right? And that's the thing.
He's more of himself.
He's more of himself, right? Exactly. And I think that's particularly what it is and what freaks Giran out, because Giran is all shadow. Giran is beast possessed.
He doesn't have the positive element that Goku has represented this whole time. So now we see that Giran is really 1 and Goku is 2.
Though the facsimile of the merry-go-round gum is 2. And we see Goku exhibit his power a bit. It pretty much terrifies Giran, and he surrenders.
Immediately. It's so fast that you can see the line carries over between the 2 frames where he says, okay, now I fight back. And as soon as the frame changes, he's already surrendered.
Well, and I think that's significant because the spirit of the bestial, it is exactly bestial. Beasts will surrender when overcome in strength.
Right. I mean, they understand their place on the hierarchy.
And
they're hierarchical beings.
Definitely Giran spiritually, definitely a hierarchical being, as well as a bestial being. And so we see him surrender, and that pretty much brings us to the end of the episode. I think it's a good spot. We see Goku fight the beast of beasts, and he's no longer going to have to worry about the spirit of the beast any longer because he has conquered it through and through.
And he has regrown his tail.
And he's regrown his tail to integrate the beast within to himself. Any final words you have, Brok, before we go to the preview?
No, I think the bigger context of what it means that he has reintegrated or regrown his tail will be more relevant as we get into his next fights. Or his next fight, I should say.
Absolutely. Definitely. Yes. Actually, you're right. It is particular that he does regrow his tail at the time because in the future it's going to be the thing that allows him to proceed further up the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go ahead and get to our preview for the next episode here. It is going to be Krillin's frantic attack, Master Roshi, or Jackie Chun versus Krillin. We're going to see how they stack up. We're going to see how Krillin's mode of being has improved substantially since we met him. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And, Brok, anything to add there?
I think we'd mentioned before that Krillin wanted to be judged by Master Roshi before, as he had been looking for him. And now he is given his opportunity.
Fair enough. So he's going to allow himself to be judged. And I think that's a good place to end. If you like what you saw, please give us a subscribe, a like, leave a comment. If you disagree with us, if you agree with us, let us know. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And this was Get the Mic, episode 23, 24, 23.
One of those.
And we'll see you guys next time.